Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of In-Depth Deck Building. I am here today building a Clue Preston. If you don't know what in-depth deck building is, I'm going to be building a deck in-depthly. I'm going to be talking about all these cards in as great as detail as I can, why I would choose them, what I'm looking for, basically upgrade, basically why are these cards here, why do they work, just to give some insight to maybe how you can approach your deck building. If you're new to deck building, this is kind of targeted at you, to kind of just see like the lines of thinking you should be following, or potentially adapting these into your own lines of thinking about why you would want to play these cards. Chat chose Clue Preston Fairmont, which I think is actually a really cool idea. Preston Fairmont is a very intimidating investigator, but to quote chat, all threes, I worry, all ones, it's liberating. That's not a direct quote, but it's the intention is there. Preston Fairmont has ones across the board and 7/7 for his health and his sanity. Anytime you gain one or more resources from a card effect, you place them on family inheritance instead of in your resource pool. His Elder Sign effect is +0. You may spend 2 resources to automatically succeed instead. Family inheritance over here is Preston's permanent card, and it's a very nice permanent effect. As an action, move all resources on this card to your resource pool. That is not the cool part. The cool part is when your turn begins, you're going to place 4 resources from the token pool on this card. Resources on this card may be spent as if they were resources in your resource pool. Discard all resources from the card at the end of your turn. So, Preston Fairmont essentially gets 5 resources around, 1 from his ability, and then 4 from his family inheritance. That is a lot of money. And the 4 from family inheritance is a really powerful tool that we can use to get a lot of value that other investigators need to work a lot harder on. Of course, we have 1s in all of our stats. All of them. So we can't really use them in the same way that other people would. It's actually, I would say Preston is an incredibly well-balanced character due to the fact that he can only, he has to use his events differently. He feels very fair, but at the same time, in the right builds, he can be very powerful. Notably, our deck building is Rogue 05, Survivor 02, Neutral 05. So, I will say that this Preston deck might not scale well into 3 or 4 players. I'm going to be build this Preston deck with 2 player in mind, and I feel that if you're going to do this in 3 players, or 4 players, well, 4 players pretty easy, you can have a whole other dedicated cluever, but in 3 players, your flex might need to lean a bit more to the clue side. So that's just kind of the nature of the game here with Preston Fairmont. In 2 players, I think this deck can function really well, and that's going to be the goal that we're going to be building for. Again, we might need to scale differently depending if we want to go to 3 players, but I think we're going to keep this pretty simple at 2 players as kind of our main goal. Preston's ability implies spending money. Events cost money, so Preston is very good at using events. You can use it for other things, like assets, of course, or Dark Horse style things, which we're going to get to. But I think generally the events are where things are very powerful in Preston Fairmont, so that's where I personally want to start. There is a cycle of events, the favor events, in the Rogue class, and Intel Report is probably the most notable one. I think this is the one that is just generally the most played, apart from maybe Counter Espionage, which is a level 1 card, which we're not going to be talking about right now. 2 cost, discover a clue your location. When you play, increase its cost by 2 to change 2 clues, so change 1 clue to 2 clues. You can also increase it again to change it up to 2 locations away. We are looking, because we get 4 resources a turn, we are looking for cards that cost 2 to 4. 4 is the perfect number because 4 cost cards are usually very powerful, and being able to play one of those each round is a very nice effect. We want this card for those reasons. It costs 4 resources to discover 2 clues. That is a pretty good rate for Preston Fairmont, especially because, again, we get those 4 resources each turn. So Intel Report is going to be the first thing I'm putting into this deck. It also gives us some burst clues, which is really, really nice. Additionally, we're also going to be playing 2 copies of Look What I Found. This follows a very similar space as Intel Report of just giving us 2 clues for 1 action. That's kind of what we're looking for as the cluever. How many times can we get multiple clues for 1 action? And Look What I Found is going to do a very good job of helping us get there. My cat's scratching at the door. I don't know what he wants. It's probably food. But yeah, 2 copies of Look What I Found. This is a very easy thing with Preston. If you do this on a 2-shroud location, which obviously you don't like always want to do it on a 2-shroud location when you're other investigators, because like those are the easy clues to get. But with Preston, you're always going to have this active on a 2-shroud location. And I do ultimately think that the upgrade costing 2 experience for 3 or less is going to be worth it. So much so that I'm actually going to be putting it into my side deck right now. You can also use it to discover clues from connecting locations with the upgraded version, which is really nice. It's a really nice thing to do. Notably, Preston can't play illicit cards. Let's go to his card page and we can look at it like that. Notably, we can't play illicit cards in Preston, but luckily that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Okay. To be honest, these are like the ones that I have memorized. We're just going to do a quick scan through this other stuff, and you know what I mean? I'm going to type clue. Eavesdrop, no. Basically, so with Preston, you are looking to take as few tests as possible, or alternatively, you want to be able to control your tests better, right? So like you want to be taking the tests you want to take, as opposed to like taking multiple Book v Shroud, which are just like basic investigate actions. We don't want to be doing that with Preston. So as you can see, there's not too much. We could go a Shadowlight route, which honestly is probably worth it. It does cost some experience, so we obviously can't put it in our level 0 deck unless we take it in the thick of it, which honestly I haven't decided on yet. We are going to look on the assets side of things, because we would specifically like to look at Mariner's Compass. While Preston isn't the best user of Mariner's Compass, we will be able to use a variety of tools to take advantage of this Mariner's Compass, and as we upgrade our decks, Mariner's Compass is going to get more consistent. Mariner's Compass allows us to investigate. If we have no resources in our resource pool, we can get additional clues. As a lightning bolt, we can also spend 1 resource to get +1 book for this skill test, limit 3 times per investigation. So with Family Inheritance and Rex's and Preston's ability, we can get +3 pretty easily. 1 from our resource pool, putting us to 0 resources, and then 2 from our Family Inheritance, giving us the extra clue and potentially like giving us +3 and giving us some extra clue, still giving us 2 money for some other things as well. We are going to play 2 copies of Mariner's Compass. Preston, I think, is at his best when you are looking at spending your clues, spending your money as opposed to hoarding your money. With that said, we do need to be aware of Preston's weaknesses, which is called Lodge Debts. When the game ends or you are eliminated, if Lodge Debts is still in your hand, you're going to suffer 1 mental trauma. It costs 10. That's very expensive. If we are looking at spending our money each round, we're going to have like a little bit of an issue when this shows up. So we need to have like a way to get through this. Also, can we just talk about how these MFers are like doing their secret handshake? That looks a little bit too intimate for good use. Preston can transfer the money from his family inheritance to his resource pool. You can use this to basically make this a 3-action resource over time, right? A 3-action weakness, right? You can move all your resources, go to 5. Next turn, move all your resources, go to 10, and then also spend that money to play Lodge Debts. It's going to really slow you down, but it ultimately is a pretty manageable weakness, and at the same time, Preston can touch into some of his survivor cards to maybe make the horror hurt a little bit less. The only downside is we can't play like Liquid Courage, which notably would actually be a really nice tool for Preston Fairmont to, especially the upgraded version, to heal the horror that he would get from Lodge Debts. But Preston is a man of the law, and he is not going to play illicit cards. That's just not the way that he wants to do things. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Lodge Debts. How can we proactively counter this card? Well, by playing one of the strongest economy cards in the game, Faustian Bargain. Because we aren't taking tests, we don't care about curse tokens. And when we are taking tests, we're probably going to be doing it with Mariner's Compass or Flashlight, which is probably going to make its way into this deck. The nice thing about Faustian Bargain is that we can distribute the resources as we wish. So we can use them on our lodge debts, or if we don't need the lodge debts because maybe they're already paid off, we can give them to our teammates while also maybe taking some of the money if we need to play an event, right? That's the nice thing. This is something that Travis pointed out with me with a Dark Horse deck, with a Dark Horse Fin deck, that with Faustian Bargain, being able to distribute the resources as you want is actually a very powerful effect. As mentioned, we are going to take Flashlight here. Spend a supply to get -2 Shroud. This means that 2 Shroud locations are very manageable. And one of our upgrades that we're going to be looking at, it also synergizes really well. This might, depending on how we want to talk about this might be worth to go to the upgraded version, and we can maybe do some cool stuff with it, and I'll talk about that once we get to our upgrades. But I think this is a very easy inclusion into the level 0 deck. Okay, honestly, I'm pretty happy with how things are looking right now. Our ally in this deck when we upgrade is going to be none other than, you know, you guessed it, Lola Santiago. So I'm going to put her into our side deck right now. The reason why, Lola also actually might make the level 0 deck if we take it in the thick of it, which we're going to talk about, but we're not going to talk about it yet. The nice thing about Lola Santiago is the bottom lightning bolt ability on her card. The +1 book and +1 foot is relevant. It actually is, more than you would think. However, we're here to spend the money off the family inheritance to discover additional clues. This works really well, as mentioned, with the flashlight, because the flashlight lowers the Shroud of Location by 2. Then you have a lightning bolt ability before and after you commit skills. Lola Santiago can be used in that ability to discover clues while the Shroud value is reduced. That's a really nice effect. Speaking of reduced Shroud values, it's probably good right now if we grab this old keyring. This might not last for the entire campaign, but just having some redundancy in our flashlight effects are probably worth the juice. Now, with all this coming together, Shed a Light might be worth exploring here. Before that, we're going to try to look at some skills here, because Survivor has some really nice skills that are going to work with our good friend Preston Fairmont. One of these is Rise to the Occasion. Commit only to a skill test you're performing, and only if the difficulty of the test is at least 2 higher than your base skill value. Preston's base skill value is always 1, which means that most tests are going to be 2 higher. This is basically some protection for the Rotting Remains or Grasping Hands that might show up, and like just Mythos cards that might be a little bit scary. Notably, there is an upgrade. He can't play it. It's level 3. He can't play that one, but he can play this level 0 version. Speaking of the upgraded cards, we are going to also play some Signum Crucis. This, I think, is... I know it's 2 experience, but it was tabooed to be -2 experience. The nice thing about this card is that it's a really good level 0 deck filler for Preston Fairmont. It doesn't necessarily mean we are a blessed deck when we play it, but it can just pass some value across the table while also giving you some like a reward for failing a test. We're going to have another skill that we're going to be looking at right away, but I like this in my level 0 Preston Fairmont decks. Again, I think Preston Fairmont upgrades pretty nicely, but the level 0 deck's always like a little bit fragile for him. And this is just a way to just get some what's the word I'm thinking? Just basically like some advantage over the game at the level 0 deck. Just like it's like a little bit that like maybe they matter, maybe it makes your teammate out, and it is a nice balance for the Faustian Bargain that you're also putting here. We're already at 16 cards. This is looking pretty alright so far. I did mention another skill that we're going to be playing, and that's Take Heart. You can only commit to any type. You can commit to any type of test, max 1. If it fails, Performing Investigators draws 2 cards, gains 2 resources. This is something that Preston Fairmont is going to be doing. You are going to be failing tests. So like Signum Crucis, you might as well just mitigate that loss as much as possible. And I think that Take Heart is really nice for that. Okay. We probably want to find some more clues. So let's go clue again, and let's just like look at all the cards and see what's what. Now, you might be thinking the same thing I'm thinking, which is there isn't much here. And you'd be right. You'd be right. Do we want to play Winging It in this deck? Let's think about that for a few seconds. Is this card actually good enough for Preston? I do like Winging It. Do I like it enough here? I don't think so. The issue with this card, though, is that there's not that many. Like, -2 versus -1 is a very big difference for the viability of Winging It versus Flashlight. Like, we're going to be really running on Mariner's Compass to get the job done here. However, one thing to keep in mind, you might be thinking that the clue burst is a little bit low here. However, look what I found. An Intel report are really good clue, like, discovery cards that are going to do a really nice job for getting what you need. There is also some consideration for Fortuitous Discovery, not in this deck, but if you are planning on upgrading into Cornered in Preston, you could feasibly play Fortuitous Discovery. In that case, I would also look at potentially getting Winging It there too. Yeah, so I think Shadowlight is going to be in the upgrade plan in this deck. And I mean, like, if we do that, do we want any sort of recursion? I think we do. I think I am going to play Resourceful here, too. Now, Resourceful may look awkward here. And it does kind of look slightly awkward. But the reason I want to do Resourceful is because recurring, look what I found, Shadowlights is very powerful. Notably, because of Old Keyring and Flashlight, we can set up a situation in which we are going to pass a test very, very commonly. So this is just something that I think that Resourceful is actually going to trigger more than you think it is going to. All right. I'm going to take some time and let's just scroll through and look at all these rogue cards. The rogue events, rather. I don't think we're going to get any more economy because I think that is unfortunately just a wasted thing. Do we want to make some friends in some low places? So I think this card's good, but for me personally, I prefer Lucky Cigarette Case 3. However, with that said, Preston, not really a great user of Lucky Cigarette Case 3. So do we maybe look at this card? So my issue with this card too is that 6 is useless. You need at least 9, and I also don't like spending an action to do there. I'm going to put this a little pin in that one for right now. So Money Talks was released in Preston, and you might think that this is an auto-include here, but again, we're looking at spending our money, so we're not really looking at Money Talks as an option here. There's a case for Swift Reflexes in the level 0 deck. It lets you spend your money to take an action, which is kind of worth it. You're basically become Schizo Tool, but like you don't need to spend anything to do it. That is pretty good. There is a card. What's the name? I never play it, but it's an event. And I'm sure people in chat have either said it or are saying it right now. It's the guy with the green gunk on his hands. He just got slimed. It's not Push to the Limit, which actually honestly might be playable in this deck. Actually, you know what? We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to put, I think we're going to put Push to the Limit in this deck, potentially. No. I mean, maybe. I think it's actually probably worth it here. I'm going to put a pin in this one, too. You know what? I'm even going to open it so I remember. Trial by Fire. Here's the guy with the green gook. Choose one of your skills until the end of your turn. Set the base value of that skill to 5. We are going to run 2 copies of this. This guy loves his goop. He just got slimed on Uh-Oh. And, have you ever watched Uh-Oh? Well, you probably have seen it, but, like, it's like a game show that was on YTV in Canada. It might have been on, I mean, obviously something else in the States. But there was a guy called The Punisher. And, basically, like, they would go into a tube and he would pour goop on them. And he would always say what the goop is. And he always would say something clever. And I remember as a kid, there was one episode where he was just like, "This is my poop." And he just poured brown goo on a kid. And I remember even thinking as a kid, I was like, that wasn't clever enough. It was just poop. But as an adult, I'm like, you know what? That actually was pretty funny. It was just his poop. All right, yeah, we'll put that here. I think 2 of those are really good. Can we play the upgraded version? No, they also made it 3 for some reason. Not that I think we would have. I think we're fine with the level 0 version, but still. So this card's nice. It should be pretty obviously. Choose one of your skills, and at the end of your turn, set the base value of that skill to 5. You can use this with Mariner's Compass to get a high shroud location, and then also just like generally just investigate pretty well with it. Again, in other investigators, this card is always a little bit tough because of the resource cost associated with it. But Preston, where this is the cycle it came out in, Clutches of Chaos, which is part of Circle Undone, Preston doesn't need to worry about these resources here. He can just spend them. I think this is now the time where we are going to take it in the thick of it. And I am going to run a Lola Santiago. And I think we are going to take 1 physical and 1 mental trauma. There's not really a reason to go 5-5, sorry, go down to 5. I think 6-6 is pretty comfortable. We do want 1 Lola Santiago here. Our other ally... Man, you run out of card space so quickly in Arkham now. There's so many good level 0 cards. It's crazy. I mean, I think we do want another ally here. I'll tell you what. If I could include him, I'd include Caleb for sure. I'd include this guy in the level 0 deck for sure. Not that we're getting the advantage, but it's just the cheapest way to get +1 book, which is kind of why we are playing, Lola Santiago. Because we want basically someone who can fill that role. Because if we don't hit Lola, but we hit the other one, we want someone who can give us, like, a book or a clue. But the problem is there's no one really around except, like, once again, he could be in here if I was building this on Arkham Build, but he's not in here yet on Arkham DB. Also, again, I don't want to build with those cards because they technically, in my mind, don't actually really exist yet. I think I'm just going to play Madame Lebranche. She's always, like, my go-to slot filler survivor ally. But again, if this came out, imagine this deck after Drowned City came out and put Lawrence Carlisle there instead. Okay, we have space for 6 more cards. Do we want any other assets? There is a case for a one-of the mask. We do of the Sparrow Mask. Probably not Fox Mask. I mean, we could do Fox Mask. But I think just having some extra protection in the Mythos phase is probably worth it. You know what? Frick it. I think I'm going to actually run 2 of these. So the reason for this is that we really want to defend ourselves. And this like makes it so that we practically have a guts or a manual dexterity on command to help us in the Mythos phase when things go a little bit sideways. Because if we see a Rotting Remains but we don't have our Rise to the Occasion or our Signum Crucis, this can be a good way for us to get there. Man, I only have 4 more cards and there's... Okay, let's talk about this. We want card draw. Okay, we could do Rabbit's Foot. Okay. Okay, I think I know what our last cards are going to be here. I don't think push to the limit is going to make it, but I think that's okay. We're going to do a once over too, just to like see how all this is. See how things resonate. All right, we're going to play Rabbit's Foot. So Rabbit's Foot, after you fail a skill test, exhaust Rabbit's Foot, draw 1 card. This one's a little bit unfortunate because we kind of have to go out of the way to really make this card pop off, I think. And we are going to be looking at replacing this in the upgrades ASAP. We are going to also play 2 copies of You Handle this one. Some more Mythos Phase protection is always nice for Preston Fairmont. It gives us a resource which we don't really care about. But it is a nice way to just make sure we don't die to certain Mythos cards. Preston's kind of like Kelvin, where you need to just be somewhat aware of it. Less so because he's less fragile, but just something to consider. We could also upgrade this into the counter espionage, because I'm pretty sure that's not illicit as we level up. I'm going to put this in the side deck as well. This is basically what we can upgrade our You Handle this one into. Scratch that. We're not a big money deck. One thing that you could, I'm going to put this as like as a flag. You could transfer into this, okay? You could upgrade into this, but you're going to need to change the goal of this deck. Because, something to keep in mind, with Preston Fairmont, you only get these resources during your turn. So if you do want to play counter espionage for more protection, you are going to need to transfer money from your family inheritance to your resource pool if you are not at 4 resources already. Now you might be asking, Justin, you've talked about Dark Horse a lot. Why aren't you playing it? The reality is I don't think it's good enough for Preston. And in this deck anyway, we are looking at reducing Shroud and not so much making our stat big enough to compete with things. Okay, so let's talk about this deck from top to bottom, and then we're going to start talking about the upgrades. Flashlight, Old Keyring. These fill in that loop of reducing Shroud to 0, so we can actually like get some clues, and as we level up, our cards are going to get better to deal with those as well, in the form of Shed a Light, once we get there. Mariner's Compass. When we're not playing events, this gives us something for us to spend our money on, and it's very easy for us to trigger the having 0 in our resource pool. Rabbit's Foot is going to give us some cards when we fail skill tests, but we are going to be upgrading out of it once the time comes, and I'll say what we're going to be upgrading into, again, once the time comes. Lola Santiago. What she does, she's like kind of like the star of our deck. She's even more of a star than our good friend Preston Fairmont, believe it or not. The +1 book and foot is fine, but doesn't really matter too much. I mean, the foot does matter. It's going to help for Sparrow Mask, which is really nice. But notably, her ability to spend our resources to discover clues at our location is really nice, especially when we get 4 money each turn. Madame Lebranche is a placeholder here for Lola Santiago. Don't be afraid to play her. She can soak for you, which is really nice. And again, Preston Fairmont doesn't really care about the cost of Madame Lebranche because he gets 4 resources each turn, which is really nice playing her because you don't really actually suffer or feel anything bad if she dies, because all you had to do was spend an action because the resource cost was free. Sparrow Mask gives us some security in the Mythos phase, along with You Handle this one and Rise to the Occasion. These are all like ways for us to help ourselves in the Mythos phase. Realistically, you don't need more than this. There's a lot of fear for Preston in the Mythos phase, but if you think about it, you're going to be drawing enemies quite a bit too, right? Like, there's also enemies in the deck, and sometimes there's going to be cards that are like, you must lose resources or discard cards from your hand. And for that, you say, well, golly gee, thank you so much, I'll do that. Thank you for that. Someone has a freaking snowblower outside, and it's literally driving me insane. I hope you guys can't hear it, because they are going freaking hog wild with that right now. Look what I found. An intel report exists as our way to get burst clues. Notably, Look What I Found does work with Rabbit's Foot, which is really nice as well. Faustian Bargain is some money if we need it, but it also is there to help our teammates, but it works really well for dealing with our lodge debts if the situation comes. Resourceful, it looks a little bit awkward here, but it works really well once we get Shed a Light into our deck, and if we're going to be drawing cards, Shed a Light is really nice to loop multiple times with Resourceful, and we can get there pretty consistently. Signum Crucis is here to make things a little bit softer if we do fail. Same with Take Heart. Now, let's talk about some upgrades. We have the Look What I Found and the Lola Santiago and Shed a Light. The question with, as you upgrade, what do you replace? That's always the hard part. Upgrades. Let's talk about this. Okay. Let's first get all of our upgrades in here. Burp. No. 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 Okay. Straighten it up. Fly right. All right. So I think we're going to want Gumption in this deck. Gumption can lower skill test. And while it looks like, you know, you listen here, mister, it looks like she is the Gumption. Preston Fairmont over here, I don't think this is actually Preston, mind you. He actually has the Gumption because he is trying to give her a high 5. And she's trying to give him a high 1. So the Gumption is presenting a high 5 when someone is requesting a high 1. So those are going to go into our side deck. What this does is it makes the makes Shadowlight more consistent to hit on higher shroud locations. The thing about Shadowlight that makes it really good is you automatically succeed a test if the difficulty is 0. You discover an additional clue at your location and an additional clue at any location, which is really nice for Preston because maybe you want to like buy a clue of a 4 shroud location with Lola, leave that location, come back to go to a lower shroud location, use Shadowlight to grab 2 clues from that location and a clue on that 4 shroud location. This card now costs 2 XP, which is a much better place for it. I personally believe it's pretty wild that this card once cost 0 experience. Okay, I'm also looking at Drawing Thin as the alternatives to Rabbitfoot. It does cost 3 XP, so I think this is like a gravy upgrade, but I do want this. So the reason why I like this is you can have 2 of them. I mean, like you also could go for a Relic Hunter and have 2 copies of Rabbit's Foot. However, I like the versatility that Drawing Thin provides in the late game for us to potentially use this also to maybe help with our Lodge debts, or alternatively just getting 2 cards. At a certain point, you can just like, you're going to fail a Mythos test. And unless it's a Mythos test that you care about failing, this can turn into those things. I don't think this is a priority upgrade, but I do legitimately think it is really nice here to replace the Rabbit's Foot. Again, we could just go Relic Hunter, and I don't think that's like a terrible option either. I don't think that's a terrible option either. It's definitely something you could explore. There is an upgraded Rabbit's Foot, but unfortunately, Preston can't take it. Otherwise, I would love to run with this card. It's basically a Lucky Cigarette Case, but by the amount you fail by, which has a much higher ceiling than Lucky Cigarette Case 3 does. Again, you could play Lucky Cigarette Case 3, but this isn't the deck for it. You could build a Preston deck that does, but this isn't it. If you do, it's probably a fighting deck with Fire Axe, which gives you this. There is an upgraded Mariner's Compass now, isn't there? If you fail, ready Mariner's Compass. Do we even need this? I mean, I'll put it in the side deck, but it's by no means a priority upgrade. This is basically a change. If you fail it, if you fail, ready it. It's nice for Preston because you have that extra money, so it does give you like a second shot at it, but I don't think it's at all a necessary thing. We're also going to look at the upgraded Flashlight, because now this allows us to use it in tandem. It's a reaction as opposed to just an action ability, which is really nice. Okay, I mean, I think that's enough for this upgrade plan here. We only need 1 Lola Santiago. There might be some cards I'm missing here, but this is like where I would start. So like I would start by ×1 Madame Lebranche becomes ×1 Lola Santiago. Bert. And then I would like focus on probably your Shadowlights. What is going to replace the Shadowlights? That's a great question. Realistically, it could be the Trial by Fires. Your deck's going to change completely when that happens. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to do ×2 Signum Crucis turns into ×2 Gumption. I think we want that first. And then we do ×2 Trial by Fire. That's going to turn into ×2 Shed a Light. And then it's like, and then upgrade freely from there. Yeah. Okay. I think that's the deck. And I think that looks pretty sweet. All right, we did it. We did it. That's another in-depth deck building. Let me know what you want to see in the future. I'm going to try to do one of these a month. I hope you enjoyed it. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Have a great one. Huge thank you to all of our supporters. Thank you everyone who watches me live on Twitch, where I'm actually currently streaming this. Huge thank you to all of our patrons. Huge thank you to all of our YouTube viewers. And you know what? Huge thank you to my mom. I love her. She's great. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.